So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. This is the live show I do at 6:30 p.m. Pacific every Sunday evening, where I take the clips that I find interesting or important or worthy of commentary on, mostly from the Sunday morning talking head pundit shows here in the United States, mainly NBC's Meet the Press, CBS's Face the Nation, ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, Fox News Sunday, and CNN's State of the Union. Those are all shown on Sunday morning, and they do interviews with newsmakers and sometimes break news. And so I take the important clips, I add my commentary in between them, and then at the end I look into the discussion section there, look for my viewers, and try to get a little live discussion going. I see I have some people joining me. I'm glad to see. The main topics I'm going to be addressing that were from the Sunday morning shows this morning. There was a lot of talk about Syria because of the chemical weapons attack. The videos that came out this last week showing hundreds of people showing symptoms of nerve gas attack, and so I'm going to show you about 10 clips on that. Then the other main topic was the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s March on Washington, which was in 1963. He gave his I Have a Dream speech on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. I think it's this Wednesday is the 50th anniversary, and all the Sunday morning shows covered that, and I'll be showing some clips from that. And in the middle there's a little bit about Egypt, and then there's I'm going to show what Fox News did. They didn't cover the Martin Luther King Jr. anniversary as heavily as any of the other shows, and then they did this weird segment on this killing in Oklahoma. And anyway, I'll get to that at the end, and I'll show you some race baiting on the part of Fox News. But the first clip I want to show, the first 10 clips I want to show are all going to be the breaking news on Syria. And for most of the Sunday news shows I watched, it looked like there's going to be a airstrike coming up sometime very soon from the Obama administration, probably using Tomahawk cruise missiles from the warships in the Mediterranean, maybe some stuff fired from aircraft, but what they call standoff weapons, where they don't actually fly over the target, and I'll show you why that is in a little bit. And on all the Sunday morning shows, it looked like that was about to happen. The only sort of contrary information I got was the breaking news on CNN's State of the Union. They had on here. Let me. I have pretty much all the first three clips here loaded up, but. The first clip is from Frederik Pleitgen, who's a German who works for Reuters, and he was actually reporting from Turkey, I think, but he had breaking news about how Syria is going to let weapons inspectors in to look at where the supposed chemical weapons attack occurred, and he also showed footage that the Syrian government had given him about how the rebels supposedly have their own chemical weapons, and you'll see some of that footage in the background when he's talking. But he's showing that the Syrian government is reacting to all of this talk of airstrikes from the Obama administration more quickly than they've really reacted to anything so far. And I'll start off showing you that clip here.
Well, it certainly shows that they're taking them very seriously, and that they're also taking the potential response by the U.S. and its allies very seriously. It was interesting over the past couple of days that you heard from organizations here in Syria that you normally never hear from. The many times that I've been here, I've never been able to even speak with an official from the Syrian military. Yet very quickly they put out a statement saying that all of this was fabricated, that their forces had not used any chemical weapons. Now the Syrian foreign minister told me that they, from the beginning, were willing to let the weapons inspectors go there. However, they obviously needed to work all that out within their government institutions, and now that was going on. He said that the government has nothing to hide, and that the weapons inspectors are welcome to go there. He wouldn't say whether or not he believed that the rebels were behind the alleged chemical attacks that happened, but he said that his government has nothing to hide, and they were more than willing to allow the weapons inspectors to go there. But clearly the Syrian government is getting the message that the international community is becoming very, very impatient, and so they have actually, for their standards, moved very quick on this issue.
So to be
So yeah, there's the latest breaking news that the Syrian government's going to let these inspectors go to the scene of the attack, and that they're putting out their own story there, that they didn't do it, and that they showed the footage. There was that footage in the background of the chemical weapons canisters they supposedly found in that the Syrian rebels had, and anyway, so it looks like the Syrian government is trying to stop this imminent attack, but there was a lot of clips that made it look, or a lot of reporting and newsmakers on the Sunday morning shows made it seem like this attack was about to happen. And first I wanted to show NBC's reporter, Richard Engel. He actually apparently talked to the general in charge of the Syrian rebels, and he had like a completely different story. He was actually trying to get the story out that Bashar Assad himself had ordered these chemical weapons attacks. And anyway, I'll show you that clip here.
Several new developments, David. We've spoken to the commander of the Free Syrian Army, General Salim Idris, and he confirmed to us that large weapon supplies have arrived to the rebel force. They came through Turkey, and we're talking about tons of weapons that they hope will change the momentum of the battle. General Idris also told us that he believes that Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian president, personally ordered the use of chemical weapons against civilians in those outskirts of Damascus last week. When we asked why, he said two reasons. One, that Syria was responding to a failed assassination attempt against Bashar al-Assad when there was an attack on Bashar al-Assad's personal convoy in Damascus earlier this month. He said that infuriated him, and he ordered his military council to draw up options, including the use of chemical weapons. The second reason, according to General Salim Idris, was that the rebels in this area that was attacked, which is right on the outskirts of Damascus, had recently acquired their own weapons. They had taken some missiles from the regime, and that Syria found this unacceptable, that it couldn't have such well-armed rebels right on the outskirts of Damascus, and that these two things combined, the failed assassination attempt and then these heavily armed rebels right on Bashar al-Assad's doorstep, led the Syrian president to take this action.
So that's NBC reporting what the Syrian rebels, or the story they're putting out, that the chemical weapons attack was personally ordered by Bashar al-Assad there, and for most of the other shows, we're also reporting that this attack was imminent. First, I'll show you a couple clips here from ABC. Here, let me get rid of. Hold on, let me get the second ABC clip ready here. And then the, hold on, I'm going to get you all three clips loaded up together, showing, so here is first the ABC clip talking about what kind of attacks we might expect from the Obama administration on Syria here.
This morning, officials tell ABC News that U.S. Navy destroyers now in the Mediterranean could be used to carry out limited military strikes. Cruise missile strikes designed to deter or prevent another chemical attack by the Assad regime if this week's suspected attack is verified.
And also Jonathon Karl on ABC. Here, let me, I have all this. Okay. Was on ABC talking about his reporting from the White House about the discussions going on about what the targets are going to be on in Syria, and I will show you that clip here.
Martha, the president has ordered his national security team to draw up options for a possible military strike on Syria. One official tells me there is, quote, a strong suspicion that the Assad regime is responsible for what appears to be a large-scale chemical attack on civilians, including many children. The intelligence community is still gathering evidence, but the senior official tells me there are already strong indications implicating the Syrian government. The attack was on rebel-held territory and apparently done using rockets that the rebels do not possess. But there is a divide in the White House on how forcefully to respond, although an official tells me if there is a strike, it must be timely, done soon enough to prevent another chemical attack. The White House does not want to act alone. U.S. officials are back-channeling through the UN to see if Russia could be convinced to agree to a resolution. Remember, Russia has veto power at the Security Council. If there is no UN authorization, the United States would lead any possible strike, but one senior official tells me, quote, "We do not want to do anything on our own. U.S. allies must commit both resources and political will." We'll have more from here in Washington.
So that's basically, they're already talking about what kind of strikes they're going to do, and it looks like the two things they want to make sure that there's international cooperation. If they can't get Russia and the UN, they'll do some kind of NATO thing, and I'll talk about that a little more in a bit. But the reason that they want to do these sort of limited standoff strikes I was talking about before is because Syria has a lot better air defense than the in the United States in Iraq. When it went into Iraq, had taken out most of Saddam Hussein's air defenses, and there was really not much air defense in Afghanistan. But Syria actually has some good air defenses, kind of like an air defense dome, which they had a retired colonel over on ABC talking about that, and I'll show you that in this clip.
So the idea is that the Syrians have created this sanctuary with their surface-to-air missiles. You can think of it as a dome of sanctuary over Syria. The president has said we want low risk, which really means that we want low risk to U.S. personnel. So he does not want U.S. aircraft flying into, penetrating that dome, that sanctuary that the Syrians have created. And so we will use our aircraft and our bombers to launch glide weapons, standoff weapons from well outside the Syrian surface-to-air missile threat, so that our air crews will not be in any danger and can return home safely.
So, yeah, that's why it looks like if the United States is going to take some action in Syria, what they're going to do is certainly not boots on the ground. That was pretty much clear everywhere. But also they're not going to they're not even going to fly over the targets. They're either going to use these cruise missiles, or they're going to use the standoff gliders. Use fighters that fire weapons from a distance, so that was the way it was covered in most of the shows. Of course, over on Fox News, they have to put in their own angle about how somehow this is all President Obama's fault, and they were the only one. They were the only ones who really linked the use of chemical weapons to something that was President Obama's fault. And I want to show you that from the very first. This is how Fox News Sunday started this morning, right here.
I'm Chris Wallace. Allegations that Syria's Assad regime launched a poison gas attack 1 year after President Obama issued this warning.
We have been very clear to the Assad regime that a red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized.
The UN calls for an investigation, while the Obama administration hedges about its response.
I'm not talking about red lines. I'm not having a debate or conversation about red lines.
We'll ask.
Now, I think that that whole thing about red lines, that State Department spokesman about red lines, I'm pretty sure that was kind of out of context, because that was from a few months ago, unless I'm mistaken. I didn't actually get a chance to research that, because as usual, I was processing the clips right after the last minute. But I thought it was interesting the way that Fox News was the only one to really make some direct connection between a failure by President Obama and this latest chemical weapons possible use by Bashar al-Assad. But another interesting thing over on Fox News Sunday, they had Republican Senator Bob Corker on to give his views on what was going on in Syria. And I don't know, I generally don't like just about anything he says. And in this case, he said something that seemed kind of stupid, that he thought that the chemical weapons attack was real because of social media. And I think what he's trying to say is that because there's all this video and all this other social media showing that there were that people actually suffered these symptoms, and I've seen a lot of video of kids who presumably couldn't have been coached, but that it actually happened. But it still seemed kind of strange that with the weapons inspectors going under to try to say that social media proves it. Anyway, here's Bob Corker making that allegation on Fox News Sunday in this clip.
Well, Chris, the amount of social media that's coming out of Syria indicates this is not something where opposition forces have contrived something. I think it's very evident that the regime has acted in this way. I do think it's always good to be cautious, but my sense is that this has happened. I think we will respond in a surgical way, and I hope the president, as soon as we get back to Washington, will ask for authorization from Congress to do something in a very surgical and proportional way, something that gets their attention, that causes them to understand that we are not going to put up with this kind of activity. At the same time, I hope it's a kind of action that doesn't move us away from the policy we have right now, where we want to see the Syrian opposition group taking the lead on the ground. So I hope we'll move our training up. I know we're doing it covertly now. I think we need to move to more industrial strength training on the ground. We need to tilt the balance a little bit more as it relates to the opposition group on the ground, and I don't want our actions that are in response to this chemical warfare to alter that. But I do think we have to respond.
Let me ask you.
So that's Senator Bob Corker there, who's I believe he's the chair of the Senate the ranking member on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, because Republicans don't control the Senate. He's pretty much in step with the Obama administration's policy, and he seems to be that's another one of the several clips I'm showing you that from all over the media this morning that seems like the airstrikes are the missile strikes and standoff airstrikes are pretty much a fait accompli at this point, almost, except for that one from CNN saying that Syria is letting in weapons inspectors and trying to shift the blame. Although Senator Corker there was saying that Congress has to authorize it, he did go on to say that he thought that the Obama administration could act before Congress comes back in a couple weeks, and he was more talking about how Congress has to step up and take responsibility. And I want to show you a short clip or a clip on that here.
But look, Congress has had a pass on these kinds of activities for a long time, and I think it's time for us to step up and take responsibilities here too. My guess is they will. I've been talking with them recently this week. I think they will come back. I think they will ask Congress for authorization. I hope Eliot and I will work together to make that happen. But I do think you're going to see actions taking place there. I do hope the United Nations force will be able to get in, or group will be able to get in and verify what's happening. But even if not, I think there are indications that this is real. This was not contrived. And obviously, the world is a better place when the United States takes leadership. This is time for us to do this. I hope we will do it soon.
So, yeah, you can see there again more evidence that a Republican is in agreement with the Obama administration taking quick action, some kind of airstrikes coming up. And the Eliot he was talking about there, the next clip I'll show you comes from Congressman Eliot Engel, who was also on that same segment of Fox News Sunday. And here, let me add up the next three clips here real quick. So yeah, Eliot Engel, he actually seemed to be making the analogy to or saying what we're going to do in Syria is going to be similar to what we did in Libya, and I read an article this week about how it might be similar to what we did in Kosovo, where if we can't get UN approval, we'll get do it through NATO and do ongoing airstrikes. Anyway, I'll show you. This is Congressman Eliot Engel from New York, who is the ranking Democrat on the House Foreign Relations Committee, talking about that here.
We have to respond in conjunction with our NATO allies. We have to respond much, I think, as was done in Libya with the NATO allies. And I think that we cannot afford to sit back and wait. We certainly cannot wait for the United Nations. The Russians are there to block everything with their veto. I look at this situation as analogous to the 1999 situation in Kosovo, whereby there was an endangered population and NATO launched airstrikes to save that population. We couldn't do anything then in the UN because, again, the Russians were blocking any kind of resolution in the UN. I think we can act. I think we should act. I think we should act for humanitarian purposes, and I think we should act because it's in our national interest to act. Assad has essentially...
But how far would you go? Are you talking about...
So there's again, that's the Democrat, but the leadership in the Democratic and the Republican Party seem to be behind some kind of airstrikes, although that goes a little further. You know, what we did in Libya and Kosovo had to do with, there was like a no-fly zone, and there were ongoing airstrikes, and it was not just standoff weapons. There was flyover, and there were even some American pilots shot down. Not in Libya, I don't think there was any in Libya, but in Kosovo there was. And I think we even lost one of our stealth fighters or stealth bombers, or anyway. And I think maybe what Representative Eliot Engel was saying there goes a little too far as to what the United States can do in Syria or in a lot of places in the Middle East. And I want to show you a clip of former Secretary of State Colin Powell on Face the Nation talking about how we may not really have that much an effect either in Syria or in Egypt. And then I'm going to transition to a few clips about Egypt. And you know, what he says here at the beginning, it echoes what I saw someone else say, that we may actually want a stalemate in Syria because neither one of the sides winning is really good for us, because I can't remember who said it. I think it was over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos. One of the panelists was saying how whoever wins, it's going to be a government that is an enemy of the United States, so a stalemate may not be that bad. And that's a little bit similar to what Colin Powell said on Face the Nation here.
About now a civil war. Who's going to prevail remains to be seen. I have no affection for Mr. Assad. I've dealt with him. I know him. And he is a pathological liar with respect to my interaction with him. But at the same time, I am less sure of the resistance. What do they represent? And is it becoming even more radicalized with more Al-Qaeda coming in? And what would it look like if they prevailed and Assad went? I don't know. And so in both Egypt and Syria, America has to take a much more clever role. We shouldn't go around thinking that we can really make things happen. We can influence things, and we can be ready to help people when problems have been resolved or one side has prevailed over the other. That's when I think we can play a role. But to think that we can change things immediately just because we're America, that's not necessarily the case. These are internal struggles. And the parties inside those countries are going to have to sort it out amongst themselves.
So, yeah, I think that's a more realistic look at what American power can accomplish in the Middle East. And, you know, I think the last couple weeks on my LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup, I've shown all these politicians debating as to whether we should cut off aid or continue aid. And several weeks back, I even showed a clip from Dennis Kucinich that I feel a little embarrassed about, where he was saying how the United States funds like 75% of the Egyptians' military, and so whatever they do, they like get our approval first. And you know, from what I've read and seen since then, I think that Egypt actually gets a lot of aid from, you know, like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, or wait, is that the right one? I don't know, definitely Saudi Arabia. And so I don't think we really have that much influence on, and the whole debate about whether we should continue aid or cut off aid. Not only is it silly because of some of the clips I showed last week about most of this year's aid already having gone out, but Colin Powell made an important point about the current military leader of Egypt was General al-Sisi, and how he's not really concerned about aid, and I'll show you that clip here.
As I view this situation now, the military leadership, General al-Sisi and his colleagues, have essentially, to use a poker term, gone all in. I don't think anything that we can do right now is going to pull General al-Sisi from that position. He feels it is his place now to bring order to the society. I think what we have to be ready to do is, when things have quieted down, make sure that the Egyptians know, not only the generals, but the others know, that America is ready, willing, and able to help you with economic assistance, with any assistance you need in putting in place institutions, but with a requirement that you have to go from this military-controlled society to a society that is based on representational voting for all Egyptians to decide what kind of a government they wish to be living under. Some of the tools that we love to talk about here, should we have economic aid or should we continue to provide military aid to Egypt? This is all sort of trivial. He can do without it, and if we don't give it to him, it won't affect his actions right now, and if we give it to him, it probably won't change his behavior. And so I think that's sort of a side issue, whether we...
So I also think that that's an accurate analysis, and I know a lot of my friends on the left like to vilify Colin Powell as because of his infamous UN speech justifying the supposed chemical weapons in Iraq that helped start the whole Iraq War, and he was a spokesman for George W. Bush, and I don't disagree with very much of that at all, but he still comes up with some good analysis every now and then, and I think that is an example of something worth listening to from Colin Powell. Several months ago, he was also on Meet the Press talking about how there was a strain of racism in the Republican Party, and I made a video about that, and that's actually about to. I'll show you that reaction to that clip from Fox News Sunday a little later, but let me see if the first I want to show you a sort of a converse of what Colin Powell said there, back from Representative Eliot Engel, the Democrat representing New York. He was saying how we have to try to nudge the Egyptian military to do what we want them to do, but instead of saying nudge, I'm not sure if Eliot, I think he may be Jewish, because I notice he uses a Yiddish term, nudge, instead of the English word nudge, and talking about what we think we have to do the military. And anyway, I'll show you that clip here.
Well, if I've got to choose a side from the United States point of view between the Muslim Brotherhood and the military, I would certainly not choose the Muslim Brotherhood. We need to nudge the military towards democracy. We need to push them towards a civilian rule, but we've had a 35-year relationship with them, and it's time to use that relationship with them. I think that we need to work with them. Morsi from the Muslim Brotherhood, in my opinion, was trying to destroy democracy in Egypt, and I think the United States needs to look at our interests. You know, they do give us overflights over Egypt. They do put our ships in priority in the Suez Canal. They do have a peace treaty with Israel. They've been our ally with military-to-military cooperation for 35 years. It's frustrating. I don't like when they kill people. I think that we have to stand and nudge them. But I think the military, the relationship we've had with the military, I think needs to continue, and I think we need to work with them.
So I think that's the pro-Israel New York Jewish Democrat position on how we have to nudge the Egyptian military. I don't know, I just thought that was amusing as a perspective on Egypt that I think is not as realistic as what Colin Powell said about how the military is pretty much all in, and our nudging is not going to do any good there. But I want to show one final clip on Egypt, which I thought was kind of interesting. The Martha Raddatz actually did her program from Egypt. She was for This Week with George Stephanopoulos. George Stephanopoulos wasn't there, the ABC show. So she did part of the show from Egypt, and then had Jonathon Karl do some of it from the United States. And I thought she did. I want to show one clip where she took the Prime Minister of Egypt, showed his name, I think, is Hazem Beblawi. I think he may be the Egyptian version of Bob Boblaw from Arrested Development. No, that's just a joke, but. He was saying how the police in Egypt were following the rules, and then she asked a journalist, her name Abigail Hauslohner, I think her name was, who was actually at some of the crackdowns on the Muslim Brotherhood camps, who saw what the police did and pretty much blew out of the water what Beblawi said. Anyway, I'll show you that clip here.
I interviewed earlier this week Egypt's Prime Minister, Hazem al-Beblawi, and this is what he said.
I believe that by and large, the police forces were bound by rules, but in any situation, there are always some exceptions.
Was that your experience?
Well, that's certainly the line we've been hearing from government officials this whole time, but I think there's little doubt that the police and Egypt's security forces did use quite a bit of force. Hundreds of people were killed on the day security forces raided the pro-Morsi protest camps and in the days afterwards.
And you witnessed this?
That's right. I personally was down there during the raids. I saw police opening fire. I heard rapid gunfire. The whole place looked like a war zone. There was smoke rising from the area, and I ended up being pinned down in an alley with a number of civilians when the fighting basically expanded beyond the protest camp itself. It was very frightening, and the police were threatening not just to the people in the camp, but directly to journalists, to myself, and also to civilian bystanders.
Matt.
So, yeah, that was the last clip I want to show you on Egypt, showing that basically the crackdown. You know, there's all this talk about, you know, how we can't really affect what's going on, but I want to show some, you know, there have been hundreds of people killed, and, you know, there's been this crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood, however unpopular they may be in the United States or even with a lot of Egyptians. There's definitely violence on the part of the Egyptian government going on, and that, you know, the long-term consequences of that, you know, you have to go look at some of the clips I showed last week about how that could lead to civil war, and just not good. But that is in stark contrast to what we were commemorating on a lot of the shows this week. The other topic I wanted to get to, and was talked about on all the Sunday morning shows, was the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. This Wednesday will be the exact 50th anniversary. And just about all the programs had on people who were at the march. Only Fox News Sunday didn't have an actual march participant. And Congressman John Lewis, who is the only surviving keynote speaker from the March on Washington, who's now in Congress, he went on all the shows except for Fox News Sunday, and he talked. He said a lot of interesting things. I'm going to have clips for most of the shows. First, he talked about how it was really a non-violent revolution that started there in this clip.
Years ago, as a 23-year-old, speaking so powerfully, and 50 years later, an elder statesman, sir, if you don't mind me saying, a pioneer of the civil rights struggle. That had to be quite a moment.
It was a moving moment to stand there in the same spot 50 years later, where Dr. King and others stood. I think in the past 50 years, we have witnessed what I like to call a nonviolent revolution in America. a revolution of values, a revolution of ideas, and our country is a better country.
You know,
Yeah, so I definitely think that our country, I mean, how can I disagree that our country is a better place for the civil rights movement, and there was a big commemoration on, like I was saying, on just about all the shows. John Lewis also talked about how the March on Washington was a turning point in the civil rights struggle. Hold on, let me just add in the third clip here. And I'll show you John Lewis talking about it being a turning point in this clip.
The March on Washington was a significant turning point. We had people coming from all over America, and there were Americans living abroad. They left France, they left England, they got on planes, and they came to Washington. There were people, black and white, Latinos, Asian American, Native American, wanted to bear witness to something. They wanted to petition the government, members of Congress, their president. And they said through their numbers and through their sense of order and dignity that America would never ever be the same. You know, President Kennedy didn't like the idea of a march on Washington. He said if you bring all these people to Washington, there'll be violence and chaos and disorder, and you never get a civil rights bill through the Congress. But when the march was all over, when Dr. King had delivered that magnificent I Have a Dream speech, the president welcomed us back down to the White House. He stood in the door of the Oval Office, beaming like a proud father, greeting each one of us. He shook our hands, and he said, "You did a good job, you did a good job." And when he got to Dr. King, he said, "And you had a dream."
So, yeah, I guess it really was a turning point there, and it was a big moment, and part of it was the way it inspired a lot of youth. And I want to show Doris Kearns Goodwin, historian, who she was apparently also at the March on Washington, and she was over, I think it was on Meet the Press, we'll see when I put the clip up, talking about how it gave her optimism that has lasted for the rest of her life in this clip.
So special about that march when I was a college student. I mean, I remember the day, I remember the singing, I remember the worry beforehand about whether there'd be mob violence, but most of all, I remember the exhilaration of feeling I was part of something larger than myself. We were helping to make the country a better place, and despite the fact that the 60s degenerated into riots later, assassinations, a Vietnam War, there was something about that hopefulness in the early 60s. It stayed with me my whole life. And that's what you have to recreate today, the idea we can change the country. Nonviolent movement, leadership did it then. Civil War did it in an earlier time. The framers did it at the beginning. We have a generation that can do it now.
Can I just...
So, yeah, the whole inspiring the youth thing, I mean, I think that was definitely an important aspect of the March on Washington, but John Lewis back on, was also talking about how some of those experiences made him more mature, made him less youthful, and I wanted to point that out over in this clip.
Dr. King was 34, Lewis 23.
You were still a kid.
I grew up when you have been sitting on a lunch counter stool and someone walk up and spit on you, or pour hot water or hot coffee on you, and you said you're committed to nonviolence. You have to grow up. To go on the Freedom Rides in 1961, the same year that President Barack Obama was born, and to be beaten, you had to grow up. So by the time of the March on Washington, I was 23, but I was an older person.
So that was some of the talk about the March on Washington, you know, what it was as an event at the time, but there's also a lot of talk about what, you know, the March on Washington was actually for jobs and justice, and a lot of it had to do with economic justice. And I want to show you first, from Meet the Press, they showed clip, well, they showed a clip, but I just want to show this chart of how income inequality has changed in the last 50 years. It doesn't quite go back 50 years, but that you can see there that the rich have gotten richer, but the poor have not done that much better. And the reason for that was debated in a couple different places. I saw Doris Kearns Goodwin, who's supposedly a historian, was trying to talk about why it is that we have this economic inequality, and she talked about some of the changes, but I think she missed one of the big reasons that things have changed from the generation of the 50s and 60s to the 70s and 80s. But first, I'll show you her analysis, and then I'll talk about it here.
And that those inspiring stories still exist. The question is there a generation where too many people are not having that inspirational moment? I mean, I grew up in the World War II generation. There's a reason why that generation, my father had an 8th grade education. He left work because he was orphaned. He had mathematical ability. He became a bank examiner. We had a house in the suburbs. I was part of a whole generation in the 50s that moved up together. Why? There was full employment in World War II. There was the GI Bill of Rights. There was an income tax that was passed. There was a sense of commitment at that point to bringing that generation going. That's eroded. It started eroding in the 70s and the 80s for the middle class and the poverty. It doesn't mean that you always have these wonderful people that come up, but how many people with talent are not being realized? Lincoln.
So the thing I thought was kind of missing in the historian Doris Kearns Goodwin's analysis there as to why Americans were doing so well in the 50s and 60s, and then that eroded in the 70s and 80s, is World War II itself. I mean, the United States won World War II, and its economic rivals were the battlefield for World War II in most cases, while the United States had almost no war damage. So after World War II, for 10 or 20 years, the United States had a huge percentage of world industrial production and had it was just sort of a unique moment in history for the United States where it got a lot more economic growth and a lot more of the world economy than it deserves based just on its resources and population. And of course, as Japan and Germany and then, other powers in the world started, China and India and even Brazil and, of course, Europe, the rest of, the European Union. And so, and of course, Russia and the Soviet Union that created the bipolar world. And now we have more of a multipolar world. And it's kind of strange to see a historian give the analysis of how the generation of World War II did better than the subsequent generation without talking about how the peculiar circumstances at the end of World War II gave the United States a big advantage that it's not going to have and shouldn't have, and hopefully never will have again, because we don't want to see that kind of worldwide destruction, however much it might advantage the United States. So I also wanted to show a clip, talking about the economic message of Martin Luther King from the March on Washington. I want to show another person who was at the actual march, Marian Wright Edelman, who talked about what Martin Luther King would be fighting for if he were alive today, and over on Face the Nation. I want to show you that in this clip.
We've been celebrating the dream, and we can celebrate the progress, but the agenda I think that Dr. King would be proposing today would be clear. Of course he would be fighting voter suppression. Of course he would be speaking out against mass incarceration and stand your ground laws, and we've got to stand our ground against any more enactment of those laws, and so that the Trayvon Martins of our world can walk without being racially profiled. But he would be calling for a close of the morally obscene wealth and income gap in this country that has left millions of people out of our economy. He would be calling for a poor people's campaign, as he was when he was killed in Memphis, when we've got 46 million rather than 35 million poor Americans and 16.2 million poor children rather than 11 million when he died. He told us about the opportunity to use our wealth to close these gaps and to use our wealth to make sure that everybody had their basic necessities. We still have not heard him. He would be talking about jobs, 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 decent wages. He would be talking about education. Our schools are still too much segregated and still very much unequal, and 80% of our black kids cannot read at grade level. And he would be calling for prevention measures to make sure we had an early childhood system to get children ready for schools. This is a time to finish the bounce check that still has not reached. The American promise has not reached the millions and millions of those left outside, and we need to get this country to realize that its greatest economic, military, and national security problem does not come from any enemy without. It comes from our failure to invest in our children who are uneducated, majority of whom are going to be of color. Our babies already are, and that's going to be our undoing.
So yeah, that's the real legacy of Martin Luther King and his speech. I think that is where that movement, those are the issues that would be important to Martin Luther King if he were alive today. That the economic issues and the injustices that continue, and I thought that was an important. And on that, I also want to play one more clip. I'm going to show a clip of John Lewis at the end also, but one more clip from John Lewis before I get to that. I got to load up these clips here real quick. The next John Lewis clip is actually talking about the Voting Rights Act that came from a few years after the March on Washington. That's only like 48 years old, but when he's talking about how that was one of the big achievements of the March on Washington along, all the Civil Rights Act, including the Voting Rights Act, and how he talked about the Supreme Court decision that basically gutted the Voting Rights Act, and I want to show you that clip here.
That bill, and the Congress passed it, and 48 years later, the Supreme Court gutted. It put a dagger in the heart of the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Well, Justice Scalia said that provision amounted to this is his two words, racial entitlement.
I was shocked. I couldn't believe that a member of the United States Supreme Court was saying providing a way, making it possible for people to participate in a democratic process would be described as a racial entitlement.
Final question.
So yeah, that is an indicator of how some of the struggle was not going in the right direction, and 50 years later, and there was also talking about the problems that the Republican Party is creating and us going backwards. Over on Meet the Press, they had Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal on, who he has like a Indian background, I'm pretty sure, but the David Gregory, the host of Meet the Press, played that clip I was talking about earlier of Colin Powell saying that there is a strain of intolerance in the Republican Party, and asked Bobby Jindal, who supposedly may be running for president in 2016, to address that. And you can see he totally dodged the question. He picked up on this question about impeachment because there are actually people in the Republican Party talking about impeaching President Obama. And if you watch, you'll see Bobby Jindal never answered the question about racism or intolerance in the Republican Party in this clip.
There's also a dark vein of intolerance in some parts of the party. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is they still sort of look down on minorities.
You heard John Lewis say that there's still not a lot of acceptance of an African-American president. Calls for impeachment this week that some have chalked up to racism. What's your view of a dark vein of intolerance within the GOP?
Well, first of all, let's talk about...
Is that fair, even?
Well, I have a lot of respect for General Powell. I think our party at its best, at its core principles, looks at people and treats them as individuals, not as members of special interest groups. Let's talk about some of these specific examples. Let's talk about impeachment, for example. Look, I reject that kind of talk. The reality is I didn't like it when the left spent 8 years trying to delegitimize President Bush, calling into question his election. I don't think we should be doing that to President Obama. The reality is one of the great things about this country is we do have a peaceful transfer of power. I disagree with this president's policies. Instead of talking about impeachment, let's go out there and let's have a legitimate debate. Let's fight his policies. Let's try to repeal Obamacare. Let's try to promote school choice. Let's fight against more government spending. You know, we've had decades of this government programs, entitlement spending. You still see the disparity numbers. You still have those numbers you showed earlier about the African-American unemployment rate, about the challenges in joining the middle class. The reality is it's time for a new approach. So let's not talk about impeachment. Let's actually talk about the policies we disagree with.
So other than talking about African-American unemployment for a second there, I don't think he mentioned race at all and didn't really address what Colin Powell said about the racism or intolerance in the Republican Party. And by the way, Colin Powell, I showed before, he was over on Face the Nation, and Bob Schieffer actually asked him a question about race over there. He was actually asking about the Trayvon Martin case and what effect he thought that would have. And so since kind of on the topic, I thought I would show that clip here.
What do you think the implications and the fallout of the Trayvon Martin case will be?
I think that it will be seen as a questionable judgment on the part of the judicial system down there. But I don't know if it'll have staying power. These cases come along and they blaze across the midnight sky, and then after a period of time they're forgotten.
So I guess it looks like Colin Powell doesn't agree with the verdict in the Trayvon Martin case, or he thinks it's questionable, but he doesn't know if there's going to be any staying power on it. But that brings me over to what happened over on Fox News Sunday. Now, I mentioned that they had one segment in their discussion panel on the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, but they didn't have John Lewis on like all the other shows or any of the other people who were actually at the March on Washington, and they actually showed the two panelists who were African American, Juan Williams, who I don't know if he's considered a liberal anymore, but he's what passes for a liberal on Fox News. And then they also had on David Webb, who's a right-wing radio talk show host, and both of them thought that it was time for affirmative action to end, and that they kind of were talking more about when should racial entitlements end than any of the issues about the March on Washington that any of these other shows were discussing. But they also did this whole segment on this crime in Oklahoma that they were obviously trying to make as some sort of mirror of the Trayvon Martin case. There's this white Australian student, college student, who's there on like some baseball scholarship, who was killed by these three kids. They're like teenagers, shot by them. And there's one of them is black, one of them is like mixed race, and one of them is white. Although you'll notice Fox News never mentions that one of the kids is white, and I'll get to that at the end because there's this sort of devastating criticism or deconstruction of what Fox News and the right wing has been doing with this jogger case in Oklahoma, and it's kind of like shows how far we haven't come since the March on Washington. But first I'll show you how Fox News tried to make the shooting of this Australian college student who was jogging in Oklahoma into being about race when talking to the district attorney in the case here.
We're learning more, especially about one of the suspects, 15-year-old James Edwards. He put videos on the web in which we see him playing with a gun, flashing gang signs. He tweeted a number of racist messages, including this one: 90% of white people are nasty, #hate them. And yet you say you don't intend to treat this as a race-related crime. Sir, why not?
Well, good morning, Chris. The reason that I'm not going to be treating this as a hate crime is, as far as the evidence goes, that is directly linked to the murder of Christopher Lane. There's nothing inside the files and the audio and the reports that we've been given that would lead us to believe that Christopher Lane was killed simply because of his nationality or because of his race. And in the state of Oklahoma, our hate crime statute is a misdemeanor, and I believe that it's more important for us to focus on the death of Christopher Lane than it is to focus on the hate and whatnot that Edwards has spewed. Now, with respect to those tweets, I don't have any evidence in my possession at this time that would allow me to prove that account is actually owned by Edwards, or that Edwards was the one who actually tweeted those statements.
Let me.
So it's hard. It's amusing to see a prosecutor being more conservative about casting aspersions on an accused criminal than Fox News, but you can see there the prosecutor kind of blowing a hole in the attempt at making this a racial case based on one of the three accused there. And then a few minutes later, Chris Wallace had the governor of Oklahoma, Mary Fallon, on and tried to get her to make the connection between this case and the Trayvon Martin case and some kind of racial aspect by saying that President Obama hasn't responded to it, even though he didn't talk about Trayvon Martin until quite a long time after the actual shooting. But anyway, I'll show you that clip here.
There are some people on the right who note that civil rights leaders and President Obama spoke out quite quickly about the Trayvon Martin case and yet have remained silent in the case of Christopher Lane. On Wednesday, 48 hours after this became international news, the White House spokesman was asked about the case. Take a look.
Do you have any reaction to the Christopher Lane case?
I'm not familiar with it, actually.
Governor, what do you make of the silence of people like Al Sharpton and, quite frankly, the silence of the president?
Well, I don't know what to think about that, but I think it would be nice, and I certainly am going to say something on behalf of the state of Oklahoma to the family, but it would be nice if our nation were to certainly express their condolences, how very sorry we are. This is a very unusual circumstance that you don't anticipate, that someone would create such a brutal crime upon an innocent person. But I will tell you that I have been to the campus of East Central University last night. I was able to shake hands with some of his colleagues on the campus, some of the students, some of the baseball players. I expressed my condolences to the East Central campus itself, the faculty, the students, the community. We certainly are going to try to reach out to the family. I have the family's phone number, and when the time differences allow, I'm going to personally call the family in Australia, and I hope I can get a hold of them and visit with them just to tell them how very, very sorry and sad the people of Oklahoma are for their tremendous loss.
Excuse me, Governor, do you think the president should speak out on this as well, particularly given his involvement in the Trayvon Martin case?
I think it would be a nice gesture for him to do that, and especially since the country of Australia has expressed their sentiments as to the murder itself. I think it would be a nice gesture for them to be able to do that, and I certainly know that's what I'm going to do.
So you can see there twice Chris Wallace tried to bring the whole Trayvon Martin connection in there, and he overstated how quickly President Obama talked about it, but also he showed that clip there of the Fox News reporter asking the White House press secretary or press spokesman there about 48 hours afterwards, when it was already international news. He said he didn't know about the case, and they showed like a really short clip. Well, there was actually a longer clip of that question shown last Thursday on the MSNBC show All In with Chris Hayes, which is a great show that I watch as often as I can. And he did this devastating criticism of the way Fox News has been race baiting on this whole case, the way and the whole right-wing conservative media jumped to the conclusion that this was race-based, even though, like I said, one of the kids was actually white, and there are other things. And he also showed that Fox News was falsely claiming all 3 of the accused were black, and it was in that question to the White House press spokesman. And I'll show you, this is like a 2-minute excerpt of the All In with Chris Hayes segment, but you can see the whole thing in the video description. I put a link to it, but anyway, here's the relevant part here.
I wonder when celebrities are going to put on I Am Chris Lane t-shirts.
Fox News White House correspondent Ed Henry even asked about the 3 black suspects at a White House press briefing.
Do you have any reaction to the Christopher Lane case?
I'm not familiar with it, actually.
In Oklahoma, this 22-year-old Australian, 22 or 23, I've seen different reports, a baseball player, came from Australia, was targeted apparently by 3 African-American young men.
Except there weren't 3 African-American men. One is black, one is half black, half white, the other is white. That's what an official at the Stevens County District Attorney's Office told MSNBC. And then we also learned that it appears the 3 assailants, after their cold-blooded murder, went out looking for their next victim, who, according to this man, was his son, a black teenager in their school who was being threatened by the boys and called his dad in a panic about it. His dad ended up calling the police when he saw the 3 teenagers outside his house. In fact, that's how they got arrested in the first place. Of course, mistakes happen in reporting stories all the time, but this is one of those revealing mistakes that shows how much Fox and company want to use this horrible murder as a means of pushing a certain storyline. The whole thing was so reverse engineered and overdetermined, they couldn't bother to wait and check the facts.
So yeah, that was definitely a devastating criticism of the way Fox News race baited on this whole Oklahoma murder, and some of those facts, even in the Fox News segment this morning, they never mentioned that one of the 3 accused was white, and so it just shows how far we still have to go on the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington coming up on Wednesday, and the Martin Luther King I Have a Dream speech, but that is not really what I want to end on after showing all those clips about the March on Washington. I actually wanted to show a clip from John Lewis talking more about the more inspirational aspects of this anniversary, and that is definitely something I want to spend my Sunday spend more of my time thinking about on Sunday than the Fox News race baiting. So I want to show you that final clip from John Lewis talking about what was the best moment of the March on Washington speech from Martin Luther King here.
Is there one moment from that day that sticks out in your mind most?
He started saying, "Let freedom ring. Let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from every molehill of Mississippi.
From every mountainside.
Let freedom ring." And I think people all across America, in their hearts, believe that freedom should reign for everybody.
Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
So yeah, that's the sort of emotional moment from the March on Washington, the I Have a Dream speech, and the free at last ending. I mean, there's a lot to think about there with President Obama is going to be giving a speech on Wednesday in the very spot where Martin Luther King gave that I Have a Dream speech 50 years ago. So that'll definitely be worth watching. So those are all the clips I have to show you. I want to take a quick look here at the comments that you've all been leaving. I'm always appreciative of all the people who watch the show live, even though I'm appreciative of the people who watch it as a recorded show, but I want to go through and look at what would be what you are all talking about here in the comment section, if I can find a couple on topic comments before I have to go deal with dinner and stuff. Let's see. Oh, DJ Pob says, takes a liar to know a liar. I think that may be a referring to Colin Powell saying that Bashar al-Assad is a pathological liar, and I think I kind of covered that before. Gabor Cosper says, the U.S. Navy is as strong as the navies of all the other countries together. I never understood why why can't the U.S. strike fast and hard instead of fiddling with weaker operations that last years? Well, I think I showed some clips there about, and I talked a little bit about how Syria has some real air defenses, missiles that, especially because the United States does not want to take any casualties at all. So, and I have a comment here from, let me see if I can add, hold on real quick. Comment here from Andrew Blumenfeld saying, can I nudge you to take a Marco Rubio? You haven't even taken one tonight. Well, of course I am. My mouth is getting a little dry here, so that is the famous Marco Rubio, and for those who don't know what that's about.
Rubio, Mr. Thirsty. Rubio, Mr. Thirsty. Rubio.
I guess I had that on a loop there by mistake, but that's Marco Rubio, Mr. Thirsty from the Colbert Report. So yeah, that's his famous State of the Union address, taking of a sip of water in the middle of speaking that hopefully is going to be a meme that follows him around when he runs for president. Let's see, what else do I have here? Justin Walsh says, think like a conservative. Big government, stay out of our lives. I demand the president speak on this private citizen case. They are losers. Yeah, well, that is kind of weird. That I did see that they criticized President Obama for speaking about cases that haven't been decided, and then no one on Fox News seemed to worry about whether these teens charged in the Oklahoma murder might be not guilty, or if maybe they were acting in self-defense. Of course, from what I've seen, that's not really true. But and KZNO2 says, wait, 3 black suspects? Weren't there only 2 blacks and 1 white? Yeah, that's what I was saying. Oh, scratch my last post. Okay. Well, I'm glad to see so many people posted comments on the clips I was showing. I hope you enjoyed the clips. I've been talking about this video, produced, edited video I've been making for several weeks. It's definitely going to be up either tomorrow or Tuesday, and that's going to be on the way. Fox News' defense of their worst interview, the Reza Eslan interview, shows how they don't understand the difference between facts and beliefs, or what I call the fact-value distinction. That'll be, and I posted a notice about that with some sources I'm going to be using over on my Facebook page, facebook.com/LiberalViewer, so check that out if you're interested. And thank you all for joining me. I hope you have a good rest of your weekend, or for my viewers over in Europe, the beginning of your week. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you all around the internet.